Well, good afternoon. I'm Ian Lesser from GMF in Brussels, and it's our great pleasure to welcome you to our conversation today on Turkey's energy policy and the prospects for Turkey-EU cooperation. It's clear that Turkey and energy issues have been in the news a great deal recently, largely because of developments in the Eastern Mediterranean and new discoveries in the Black Sea. But today we get to focus on a somewhat different aspect of this picture, which is to say Turkey's own energy economy and the outlook specifically for cooperation with Europe on energy, on infrastructure, and related issues. And we have a wonderful group of people with us today to discuss this question. I'll let our moderator introduce them to you in a moment, but let me at the outset say a very big thank you to TOBB, to the Turkish Union of Chambers and Commodity Exchanges for their partnership in this program, but in fact for partnership in a program, a very active one on Turkey, Europe, and global issues that is run by my colleague Kadri, Senior Fellow here in Brussels, and is active in convening around these issues on here, but also on both sides of the Atlantic. And this conversation is part of that series. Let me now just turn this over to Kadri with great thanks for organizing this. Thanks again to all of the speakers for joining us and to all of you who've joined us for this virtual conversation. Kadri, over to you.
Thank you, Ian. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning if you are in the United States. So thank you very much for joining us today. And my name is Kadri. I'm GMF-TOBB Senior Fellow with the GMF here in Brussels. And I'm very pleased to moderate this discussion. Well, as Ian said, since the outbreak of the COVID-19, we are trying to come together virtually to discuss some of the most important issues concerning Turkey and other issues. And today we will discuss another important topic, the energy, with my distinguished guest. And indeed, Turkey has very few resources on its territory and has to import more than 70% of its energy, of the energy it consumes, and 95% of its hydrocarbon consumption is also imported. So the Turkish energy strategy has two dimensions. First, to ensure its own energy security by diversifying its energy mix and its source of supply, and secondly, to support the various pipeline projects that transit through its territory with an ambition to become a key player in the regional energy game. And obviously, the cooperation in the energy field between Turkey and the EU is still seen as an important pillar of their relations. The EU's desire to diversify its source of supply, reduce its gas dependency on Russia, and thus to turn to the resources of the Central Asia, the Middle East, and the Eastern Mediterranean gave Turkey an important role in the EU's diversification policy. But there are huge challenges looming over this cooperation and their relations in general. So obviously there are a lot to discuss. And for this, we have three excellent speakers. Please let me first to introduce them. Our first speaker is Pınar İpek. Pınar is Associate Professor at TOBB University of Economics and Technology in Ankara. And our second speaker is Eser Özdil. Eser is founder and managing director at Glocal Group Consulting, Investment and Trade in Ankara. And our third speaker is Laurent Ruseckas. Laurent is executive director at IHS Markit in London. So thanks to all of you for joining us. And well, first of all, as moderator, I will ask some questions to our speakers and have a conversation with them. Then we will open up, of course, to all of you. And just to say this, this is on the record. And if you would like to put a question, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom window, and we will keep track them, and we will get as many of you as we can. Please specify also whom you are asking your question. Well, with this, I would like to start with you, Pınar, if you agree. Maybe you can just give us a big picture of the Turkish energy sector and how the Turkish energy sector is evolving What are the geopolitical, economic, and security motivations behind this change in the Turkish energy policy? Over to you.
Yes, thank you for this invitation and for this great event. I'm happy to be here with Laurent, Eser, so thank you, Kadri. Yes, so to use the time efficiently, I would like to highlight that, first of all, Turkish energy markets are unique because it has two essential characteristics. One is, as you mentioned, import dependency and the growing demand. And indeed, Turkey has the highest rate of growing energy demand among all OECD countries in the last 15 years. And it is a big market for natural gas and electricity. Indeed, number 16 ranked in the world in terms of numbers in 2017 for electricity consumption, number 17 in the world for primary energy consumption, and number 22 ranking for petroleum and other liquids. So these all show that Turkey is a big energy market. So in addition to rapidly growing demand in Turkish energy markets, Turkey's energy relations in its foreign policy have mostly focused on energy supply security. Energy supply security is the concept that both energy-related policy elite and the foreign of policy diplomats prefer. So in this energy supply security, two concerns were more prioritized. These were accessibility in terms of building the infrastructure and so on, and affordability, obviously the cost of energy supply. So within this framework, actually we could see two separate historical terms that can tell us the shift. Number one is the early back in the 90s, when there was a lot of focus on pipeline politics, obviously to bring the Caspian Sea oil and gas reserves to Turkey, and then eventually to European energy markets. So accessibility, as I said, in terms of building the necessary infrastructure and so on, was high on the agenda. And then growing the demand parallel to Turkey's economic growth rate, especially in the mid-2010s, which we were performing much better, affordability had been a major concern. Lately, sustainability in terms of more usage of renewable energy resources and domestic resources, which I have some concerns that I will highlight, and to an extent, reliability. I use reliability in terms of the geopolitical risks and uncertainties given the supplier countries for Turkey's, especially natural gas. So sustainability and reliability has been also a concern lately. Affordability remains to be a more important challenge, I think, especially because of the Turkey's high current account deficit, mainly driven by energy imports, actually. We have an import bill about $44 billion overall, including natural gas, crude oil, and crude oil products. So this is a very significant amount in Turkey's chronic trade deficit. And these have, unfortunately, implications for the exchange rate market and Turkish lira. So there is some implications for the instability. And lastly, of course, Turkey has been a long time aspiring to be an energy hub. And lately, there have been some crucial steps, especially for gas market, after the liberalization of electricity market for bringing more investment and spot market legislation and so on. So if we look at the change in the structure of the market, I would like to share some of my slides with you. I guess now, yeah. Here, actually, this is the long-term view of Turkey's natural gas imports. What you see here is by time, Turkey has diversified, especially its natural gas imports. Mostly it was Russia and some LNG, but later, as you see the green part by Azerbaijan, especially after TANAP's completion, Azerbaijan's share increased. And then you see also this more colorful part, which is mostly LNG. Indeed, when you look at the Turkey's changing natural gas imports, you see a significant shift, as I said, by TANAP and LNG imports, both by long-term contracts from Algeria and Nigeria, as well as spot market prices, spot market imports, sorry, from United States LNG and Qatar LNG and some others. So I made the colors same. So the blue one, as you see, in 2017, it was 52% Russia, which we have bounded pipelines, mainly Blue Stream and later Turkish Stream, and the West Pipeline as well, which dropped to 34% in 2019. But as of July 2020, this is even further down to 27% approximately. So you see the increasing share of Azerbaijan, again, thanks to the completion of the TANAP pipeline. And you see also here about 28% by 2019, Turkey's LNG. So in order to boost LNG imports, Turkey actually has did a good job, in my opinion, by increasing its entry capacity, both by its LNG terminals, which is in the Marmara and in Hatay, but also by FSRUs, floating storage units, regasification units that increase daily capacity of Turkey's LNG. And there are also ongoing efforts to increase natural gas storage. So as you see here by numbers, as of 2020, Turkey's storage capacity is about 10 BCM, which increased from 2.3 in 2016. And daily entry capacity increased to 140 million cubic meters per day, which is a quite significant increase. So natural gas, the reason I immediately started with natural gas is because it's important for Turkey's power generation and for already installed capacity for electricity power. So as you see here again, Turkey is trying to move away from imported resources, especially natural gas, and try to use more first domestic resources, which is dominantly hydropower. This red one is hydropower, no, green one, sorry, green one, which used to be 20%, but increased to 31%. And what is concerning here is 21% remaining, which is indeed imported coal. So to make it quick and to say the least from the beginning, I think this is one of the avenues, one of the platforms that Turkey can increase its cooperation with the EU to cut down the imported coal, either by facilitating the energy hub for Turkey for natural gas, for more natural gas, but with more affordable and competitive prices, and further with more renewables, which Turkey needs financing and technology. Even for coal, Turkey can cooperate with companies and R&D projects for this carbon emission capture technology and so on. And Turkey wants to also produce this domestically. So to sum up here again, there is a concern for sustainability of Turkey's energy supplies because of the natural gas and the coal problems. I shouldn't say problems, but dependency and carbon dioxide emission problems for Turkey's electricity production. And this is another way to look at it, because already the previous one was generation, and this is for capacity. So Turkey would like to increase the renewable capacity. So there is, as I said, more need for finance and technology. And there is not much room for Turkey to increase its hydropower. It's already using a lot. So that means we can cut down the coal and increase the renewables more. And as I said, if we can have a more competitive, more liquid global hub type, and I shouldn't say global, but regional hub for natural gas, we can also increase or contain the natural gas as a hub. This is basically if we come to shall I stop here or shall I go to the EU cooperation part as well, Kadri?
Well, if you like, let's stop here and then come back to you again. It would be maybe let's continue with the Eser. Maybe Eser, you can just reflect on what Naranım said and go give us a bit from private sector perspective. How do you assess the Turkish energy policy? And then you can also maybe, given these changes and challenges, to tell us also what do you think about, what are the prospects for the cooperation between EU and Turkey? And I would like to hear also your comment on that. Then when we will come back to you, Naroja, you can also obviously speak about, give your opinion on that. Eser, over to you.
Sure, Kadri. Thank you very much for this invitation. I would like to thank GMF as well as TOBB for organizing this very timely event, I believe, because we have always been talking about energy cooperation between EU and Turkey, and this is one of the fields which couldn't be exploited as much as possible in the past because of numerous ups and downs in relations between two parties. But I see that, especially from the private sector perspective, I see many cooperation opportunities between European and Turkish counterparties when it comes to natural gas, when it comes to exchange technology, when it comes to exploration activities, especially recently in the Black Sea region. Turkey is also developing very good infrastructure for production of windmills as well as photovoltaics when it comes to the renewable energy. These are many field of opportunities can be exploited between parties and create win-win situation for the companies and countries in the region. As you said that, well, I'm coming from private sector perspective, and before establishing my own company, I served as Secretary General of the leading lobbying organization in Ankara, which is called Petroleum and Natural Gas Platform Association, in order to be bridge between private companies as well as the government institutions in Turkey to further liberalize the natural gas markets. Of course, as Ms. Pınar explained, that the natural gas as well as the oil, particularly important for the Turkey's economic balance. Especially, this is becoming more relevant when you see the numbers during the last 30 years. As you said that in the description of this panel, Turkey was one of the fastest growing countries in terms of energy demand, in terms of primary energy demand in OECD countries. And actually, this graph shows very clearly that Turkey's primary energy demands increased more than threefold during the past 30 years, actually. So there is a very strong background of this energy demand increase because Turkey is a young and very dynamic country, over 80 million of populations, and the median age is only 33 years old. But of course, the Turkey's liberalization policies mid-1980s were quite determinant in this energy hike because of the industrial production perspective, as well as use of natural gas in the cities, as well as use of natural gas in the electricity generation increased this demand. So actually, in the 30 years when Turkey's energy demand increased threefold, Turkey's domestic energy production share decreased almost 50%. In 1990s, Turkey was meeting more than 50%, almost 50% of its energy demand from domestic sources. When it comes to 2018, it dropped to 24%. This is something quite important volume for the Turkey. And I can say that for all ministers, all governments, this domestic energy production issue became one of the most important points. There's a reason of this, because most of this energy demand increase came from fossil fuels, especially from oil and natural gas. Still, the Turkish economy is heavily dependent on hydrocarbon resources. Almost 60% of the energy demand comes from fossil fuels. If you look at the macroeconomic balances of the Turkish economy, it's very clear that Turkey's major imports goes to oil products as well as natural gas. If you look at the combined numbers, especially for the last 10 years, we can say that $40 billion as the average Turkish economy paid to import the energy. Therefore, still one of the major focal point of the current Turkish decision makers is to decrease these imports somehow via own production, or even creating a kind of a competitive market and create a competition between suppliers, especially when it comes to natural gas, and then decrease the imports. So I will mention how these are being reflected when it comes to current decision-making process. So I say that it's a kind of an oil and gas policy, even though if you look at the Turkish decision-making set, there are lots of references to renewables, especially wind, solar, and hydrology. But in the short and medium term, the Turkish energy policy is very much focused on oil and gas policy. So what are the major parameters of this oil and gas policy? I must say the first, the government is trying to increase as much as possible the domestic oil and gas production. Therefore, actually, the Turkish government, including Turkish Petroleum, as well as private companies who are operating in the Turkey, they are focusing on to increase domestic oil and gas production, either at seas, Mediterranean and Black Sea, or on the onshore sites, especially on the southeastern part of the country, as well as in the Thrace region for the shale gas activities. This is number one. And especially the recent discovery of Black Sea is very much related to this perspective. Because if you look at the historical chart, actually the Turkey's domestic oil production was covering 5% of the indigenous demand in the country. And indigenous gas production was covering only 1% of the Turkey's entire consumption. So these fields were mostly located on the onshore part of the country. Therefore, actually shifting the focus from onshore to offshore was crucial in terms of this perspective, because offshore areas of Turkey is quite unknown. But when it comes to the Black Sea, there were intensive exploration activities since 2000s, and especially Turkish Petroleum drilled 8 wells in the Black Sea region along with partnership of super majors like ExxonMobil, BP, Petrobras before. But actually identification of this Tuna 1 location as well as Sakarya gas field came after this recent activities, which was shaped after 2015, I must say, with the new energy policy. The second one is, of course, to decrease import cost of oil and gas, because until you discover your own resources, Turkey will dependent on imports. So in order to decrease the share of import, you may have some different policy set. The one, having some assets in abroad. So if you look at the Turkish Petroleum invested in Azerbaijan, in Libya before, in other countries as well. So I think with the recent ownership of the drill ships, as well as the seismic vessels, we may expect more increasing footprint of Turkish Petroleum on third countries in the world. It shouldn't necessarily be only in Mediterranean basin. It shouldn't necessarily only be in the Black Sea region. We can see increasing footprint of the Turkish Petroleum, maybe along with some other Turkish upstream companies as well in the future. This is also an important element for the Turkish decision makers. The third, to diversify gas supply sources, especially LNG, became extremely instrumental in this perspective. Investing to LNG infrastructure was one of the key decisions of the Turkish decision makers took in 2015, especially after downing the Russian jet in 2015, November 24th. As you may remember that, because at that time, Turkey's gas offtakes were quite limited. Turkey was dependent more than 50% to single supply, which was Russia as well as Gazprom. So therefore, actually, diversification of gas supply sources via LNG was an important topic. And I will show you the numbers in the next slides. This paid well, especially during the first 6 months of this year and during the past 2 years, because of increasing spot LNG shares in the Turkish market. The spot market was relatively cheaper than the long-term Brent indexed LNG contracts in the past years, and still probably will remain to the foreseeable future in the years to come. Third, of course, the flexibility was important. Now Turkish system is very flexible in covering the peak demands, as well as being a buffer infrastructure to supply even the third countries. This will be a very interesting point of view, in my opinion, to increase the cooperation, especially between the Southeastern European countries, which are highly dependent on one source, and some of them landlocked countries, and having very limited flexibility to bring LNG to international markets. Of course, the signed competitive flexible contracts. The last point, if we look at the recent contracts that BOTAŞ was signed with short-term perspective, these are very much this is very much in line with this last point of view. I want to show the slides. I don't want to go into the detail, but if you look at the slides as which is a little bit detailed more than Pınar's numbers. The imports from Russia and Iran is in a continuous decline, especially for the last 2 years. Which sources are compensating? Yes, Azerbaijan is playing a role, but more role is being played by LNG, especially spot LNG supplies. In 2020, in the first 6-7 months of 2020, this was more obvious because of increasing share of US LNG sources. Turkey is, in 2020, Turkey is the 4th biggest LNG importer from United States. US LNG projects are very flexible in terms of pricing and formula perspective, and therefore BOTAŞ, as well as a Turkish private company, Gas, prefers to buy more spot cargoes, which are US origin, and therefore increasing share of United States spot LNG right now, filling the gap, of the Russian and Iran, decreasing share of Russia and Iran in this perspective. So let's come what we can see in terms of infrastructure. As Pınar said, that Turkey's gas entry capacity exceeded 300 MCM per day this year, which is quite above of the Turkey's peak demand, which was 35 MCM. The historical peak of Turkey was 235 MCM. Now the entry capacity is over 300 MCM. And with the new investments to storages as well as the LNG infrastructure, which is expected to reach over 500 MCM per day in 2022. So I think another particular focus should be on the post-2021 era. Why I say post-2021 era? Because when we were discussing the Turkish decision makers about the market liberalization and establishing more competitive marketplace, the long-term contracts of Turkey, either signed by BOTAŞ or Turkish private companies, was the first point that this liberalization efforts cannot be realized. And if we look at the Turkish long-term contracts, actually most of these contracts will be expiring after 2021. So therefore 2021 and afterwards will be quite critical for Turkish gas market to liberalize it. In 2021, in overall, 16 BCM of long-term contracts will be expired. 6.6 BCM between BOTAŞ and Azerbaijan partners, another 8 BCM between BOTAŞ private companies versus Gazprom, and another 1.2 BCM with Nigeria. And after 2025, actually, Blue Stream, Iran contracts, and Algeria also will be expiring. So there is going to be huge gap, or there is going to be a huge place in Turkish market to be played by competitive suppliers, between competitive market players as well. So I think if we also put upcoming production from Sakarya gas field, which the target date for first production is 2023. I don't think that in 2023 we will see the plateau level full production. We may see a we may see gas flow in 3 years. This is quite ambitious plan, I must say. As a professional worked for oil, as a professional worked for upstream industries, but still there might be some gas flow be possible. But after 2025, I think if the prospects are promising enough in the Black Sea region, we can see something around 15 BCM per annum production from the Sakarya gas field. And this will also put huge advantages to create competitive marketplace in the country in order to increase competition between the suppliers as well as the upcoming production in the country. Last but not least, I will stop after this slide. I know I used a little bit more than my dedicated time, but this is my last minute, especially for this round. As Pınar Hanım said, that Turkey has a long-term perspective to position itself as a gas trading hub. Actually, this was my master thesis like 10 years ago, for EU-Turkey relations in France. And thanks to EU, which financed my master degree, I had a chance to work on EU hubs, which were recently flourishing at that time, especially the TTF. Even TTF was not that liquid, and nowadays. So as also my former organization platform, we worked very intensively along with European Federation of Energy Traders and other respective partners globally, how we can turn Turkey a gas trading hub. So if Turkey position itself as a gas trading hub, in the current situation, we have most of the prerequisites are done. I mean, the infrastructure is at a very good shape. Secondary legislation at gas in Turkey is very much aligned with EU legislation. BOTAŞ as a transmission system operator has very developed skills. These are very good in terms of operating the high pressure pipeline. We have Energy Exchange Istanbul, EPH right now. The intraday operations are in the intraday gas trading operations are continuing more than 2 years. The futures market will be operational next year. So there is a software infrastructure in EPH. This is also working very well. The liquidity is increasing over the EPH, but we have very limited suppliers. BOTAŞ is dominating majority of the market, both from supply side as well as the domestic market side. Second, since most of Turkey's contracts are dominated by oil indexation, it is not very easy to create the competition in the domestic market, which can be very possible after 2021. Therefore, if Turkey can establish itself as a gas trading hub in a capability to set a reference price for this region, which is going to be a very huge attraction point, because Turkish gas market is more than 45 BCM. And if you look at the entire Southeastern Europe and Balkan countries, in the combined more than 12, 13 countries can make another 40-45 BCM of market magnitude. Only Turkey alone makes it. So therefore, and with the current infrastructure, especially for the LNG, still this is the biggest problem of the Southeastern European countries, to diversify the import sources with flexible infrastructure. I think with this perspective, Turkey can create lots of benefits, especially for the Southeastern European countries. And from the EU perspective, these are the most problematic regions in creating competition as well as flexible and diversified supplies for the natural gas. I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Eser. I will come back to this discovery on the Black Sea. I mean, after Laurent. So you will have the occasion to speak on that. Laurent, so from the energy market perspective, how do you assess the Turkish position with regard to the gas supply and with regard to the renegotiation of the contract with Russia and other? And how do you see it from where you are, the prospect for the cooperation between Turkey and the EU? And what are the challenges for you? And I would like to also hear your comment on the European Green Deal, because this is a really important topic now when it comes to the energy. Is it creating more opportunity for cooperation? How do you see it? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Kadri. Thanks to the two previous speakers. Enjoyed those comments, and thanks to GMF for hosting. I won't repeat what Pınar has already said, but clearly over the past 10 years, Turkish policy has put itself in a much stronger position with regard to security of gas supply, and in particular given BOTAŞ tremendous leverage as it starts to renegotiate these long-term gas supply agreements with Gazprom and with others. Through the new regas capacity as discussed, through the Shakhtini's Phase 2 supply from Azerbaijan, and also there's been a kind of explicit policy of restraining gas demand in the power sector. Now, a lot of the decline, not a lot, but some of the decline in Russian market share in the past couple of years, and some of the declining demand, gas demand in Turkey has been declining year on year for a couple of years now. Some of this is due to happenstance. You had a whole bunch of the BOO power plants that had 20-year agreements signed in the late 90s. These were gas-fired power plants producing baseload. They had a guaranteed price. They were running 100% of the time, except for maintenance, and selling electricity at a guaranteed price. When those agreements expired, and a number of them expired in 2018, 2019, you had a situation where they were just normally competing in the market, and so they went from baseload to being peaking plants, running 30%, 40% of the time. So that cut gas demand down. 2019 was a sort of probably more than 1 in 10, probably 1 in 20 high year for hydro output, which hit gas demand in the power sector. And then this year, of course, we've had the impact of COVID-19. But in any case, the plan to reduce the share of gas in the energy mix is there, and it has contributed to this increased energy security. Now, one interesting thing, I think Eser, you described that the increasing imports of spot LNG and how that brought prices down on average. I mean, I just want to emphasize how shockingly low and how perfect Turkey's timing was, and how shockingly low for a period of time prices have been. I think a lot of firms like ours were predicting that at a certain point in 2017 or 2018, LNG demand globally would fall well short of LNG supply because there was a lot of new capacity coming on. This finally happened in late 2018, and just at the time when Turkey had built this new regas capacity, could capitalize on it. The first half of this year, some of the numbers, one thing we track is the delivered price for LNG into various terminals around the world. And the delivered price for some cargoes during the first half of this year into Turkey was bizarrely low, $3, even below $3 per million BTU, which is kind of shocking. And you wouldn't believe it if it weren't true. So that was tremendous, and that's what led BOTAŞ to maximize imports of LNG and take, really underlift Russian gas on those Gazprom contracts, which of course has the added benefit of saying, well, look, we don't actually need very much of this gas from you at the moment, Gazprom, and that puts BOTAŞ in a very good position as the negotiations proceed. I would note that I think the Russian share over 7 months has been down very low. I think that'll come up through the rest of the year. Some August data, which is not available yet from EMRA, has come out from Russia, suggesting that Russian imports started to rise quite quickly again in August. And what's happened is that the oil-linked prices now of Gazprom gas sales to Turkey are starting to reflect the collapse in the oil price in March and April, and a lower price level since then. So I think we'll see, and LNG prices are recovering a bit. So I think we'll see more Russian gas through the rest of the year, probably end the year at about 30% market share. How will Turkey use this leverage? And by the way, the Gazprom negotiations are second. First on the agenda is negotiations with Azerbaijan over Shakhtini's Phase 1 gas. That contract expires in April of next year. Obviously, the political environment surrounding that is very different, but from a market's point of view, BOTAŞ wants to drive a hard bargain and get the cheapest gas it can. So I'm not quite sure how that will play out. But obviously the big one is the Gazprom contracts, 8 BCM, only half of which are with BOTAŞ, but I think BOTAŞ is basically handling those negotiations. I think, and Eser, you said some of this. Number one, a different pricing formula, and number two, more flexibility. More flexibility is absolutely critical, and I think will happen. In terms of the pricing formula, what does it mean to say, Gazprom has already done this in Europe, not necessarily willingly, but if you go back 10 years, most of Gazprom sales into Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, were based on an oil linkage. And now most of Gazprom sales into Europe are based on a gas market price. In Europe, it's very easy to say what a gas market price is. In Italy, it's the PSV hub price. In Northwest Europe, it's the TTF hub or German hubs. In Turkey, the EPİAŞ gas trading hub is which you mentioned as Eser, is in very infancy compared to the big European hubs. So you can look at either what is a delivered price for spot LNG. That's something that if I were BOTAŞ, I would say to Gazprom, you must compete with this. You could also start to look with the startup of the Trans-Adriatic pipeline and Azerbaijani gas flowing through Turkey, through Greece and Albania to Italy. There's also, in theory, a link with the Italian market price. So I think at the end of the day, market share is not necessarily going to be critical. I can very much see Gazprom doing what it's done in Europe, pricing its gas competitively, providing a lot more flexibility. And then you could imagine in the future, I mean, obviously production from the Black Sea would have a big impact on this, but you could imagine in the future, Gazprom's market share going up again relative to where it is today, but that not representing any sort of threat or problem for energy security, and that would be competitively priced gas. I'll just move on and conclude with a few words about cooperation with the EU, and I'll get in the end to your European Green Deal question. I mean, focusing on gas, Eser, you described with a positive spin what's happening with EPİAŞ and trading and all of this, but you also noted, and I would probably put more emphasis on the negative side. I mean, Europe started in 1997 with statist, state-dominated energy markets and gas markets, and has completely transformed those over the course of this, past 25, 23 years. In Turkey, you had a very nice gas market law passed in 2001. Then there were plans to unbundle BOTAŞ and all that. Has not happened. It has not properly been implemented. BOTAŞ, I would say, is more dominant, stronger than ever. Eser, as you said, on EPİAŞ, BOTAŞ, when there's one giant player dominating a market, it's not a real market. The easy way, and all of this is going to be a barrier to the free flow of gas back and forth, not just on long-term contracts, but traders moving gas on a daily basis, moving gas through physical flow, virtual reverse flow. That's the kind of integration that would be fantastic, would benefit Turkey, would benefit the EU, but we're so far from that right now. The way Ukraine, with strong political drivers to do so, of course, the way Ukraine has achieved this is by joining the energy community, which is an institution started by the EU for countries that are near Europe but not in the EU, wherein the countries that sign up basically adopt European rules on gas and power regulation. Ukraine has done that. Is now, we've seen this summer, especially its gas storage, been really fully integrated into the European market. So that's something that Turkey could do. One point I would make, if Turkey today had pure EU rules, gas directive rules, the third energy package rules, then starting the minute that Azerbaijani gas starts to flow to Italy, those Italian buyers could say, the PSV price here in Italy is X. If we could sell this gas back in Turkey, where this gas just came from, we could make a huge margin. That gas would come in, and reduce the price in Turkey if there was a real market. There isn't a real market, and you can't do this. There is mechanism in the TAP pipeline to use virtual reverse flow. You instead of getting your gas delivered to Italy, you still have to pay the tariff as if you were delivering it. But for a tiny bit extra, you leave that gas at the Turkish-Greek border, and then in theory you can sell in Turkey. In practice, you can't, because Turkey doesn't have the gas transmission rules similar to the EU. So that's kind of the negative part. I could say a lot of positive, but a lot of that was already covered by Pınar and Eser. With regard to the Green New Deal in Europe, I mean, I don't think it really is. It puts Europe, on a path that Turkey is a much earlier stage on, and you're going to see an increasing gap between the EU and Turkey in terms of renewables growth. Turkey has a plan, has started to implement that plan, but it's at the beginning of it. And then, real deep decarbonization, the building a hydrogen economy. That's the really flavor of the day right now in Europe. And this is something where Turkey is not started to move in that direction. But I don't think that's really an impediment to cooperation necessarily. But it's just something there that, people in the EU looking at Turkey will observe.
Thank you so much, Laurent. I will open up soon for the audience and for the Q&A, but before that, I will ask you still a couple of questions. But I encourage the audience to ask the question by using Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom window, and we will open it up for your question very soon. Laurent, I would like to have also a quick comment. Maybe how do you see? I mean, this East-Med tension, without going to the details, just energy development. Do you think that can potentially affect also EU-Turkey cooperation in the energy, or how it can affect? Let's say you are muted, Laurent.
Yes. So. I've tended to see Turkish activity in the East Med as not really being about energy so much. I mean, I know Turkey feels a bit excluded from what's happening in other parts of the East Med. I think there's a chicken and egg. Was Turkey feeling excluded and started to react, or was Turkey reacting preemptively and then was excluded? That's a question. But and I think everyone understands Turkey's grievances with regard to the way the territorial waters are drawn, because, under UN law of the sea rules, and also Cyprus, the Republic of Cyprus, licensing its area without regard for the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. But I think that in general, I think the Turkish activity there is more part of a broader, assertive foreign policy. I don't think it's really about energy supply to Turkey, whereas the Black Sea clearly is. So it creates obviously a negative atmosphere, which we all can see in EU-Turkish relations. I do think that in terms of this very technical stuff, like adopting more liberal rules for gas transmission and this and that, and gas trading, and integrating with the gas market, that's the type of technical thing that can really be separated from, to a very large extent, from broader, political tensions such as they are.
Thank you, Laurent. Eser, I would like to also have your, because you spoke about the Black Sea. How is it really significant is the Black Sea gas discovery is really? How do you think, and it will change the Turkish energy outlook? Or is there potential to change energy outlook for a country?
Kadri, maybe I can explain this question with some hands-on experiences in the upstream industry for the last 10 years, actually. When I finished my master's in 2010, I immediately returned back to country and I started working at Platform. The Platform is the umbrella organization of the upstream companies, as well as the gas importers and wholesalers in the country. So one of our daily businesses was dealing with Turkish institutions in order to open more room for the upstream industry, especially for the private investors. And let me explain the situation. I found myself in an industry which is covering 5% of the entire need of oil and 1% of the entire gas demand of the country. And I can say that, especially, of course, we had very good relations with the energy quarters, energy minister and related decision makers. But when we were going to talk with, let's say, a Minister of Finance, they were paying very tiny attention because from their perspective, 1%, 5% means very small in terms of the effect to the macroeconomic balances. And we were fighting a lot, especially to convince them, look, the offshore fields of offshore areas of Turkey are promising. We don't know the real potential in these fields. Therefore, we need to focus on offshore. Let's open onshore fields more to the private companies, especially the small to medium-sized private companies, in order to fully exploit. In a giant field in the Middle East, a well, an oil production well, can produce up to 150 to 200,000 barrels per day. In Turkey, the average barrel production for oil is 40. For oil, 40, I mean. So in overall, the daily production was around 50,000 barrels, etc. For the gas, when we were discovering a reservoir which was around 100 million MCM or 150 million MCM, actually we were celebrating it because of new $20-30 million of deposit, etc. From this perspective, from this psychological perspective, discovering something 405 BCM, it's really huge, my friend. It's really, really huge from a Turkish upstream industry perspective. From international perspective, a resource which is around 405 BCM is giant. It's also very meaningful in terms of international standards, in terms of the capacity of the resource. And I think this Tuna 1 discovery is the biggest gas discovery in 2020, if you look at the globally. So from this perspective of the Tuna 1 is quite substantial only. And actually what is more promising, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the seismic data, if you look at the available data from other regional countries, the Tuna 1 well is only one well, which is the first well of the Sakarya gas field. So there are more perspectives in the Sakarya gas field in the upcoming years or upcoming weeks or even the months. We may hear more discovery in other wells in the Sakarya gas field. Therefore, actually, this Tuna 1 location may easily turn another, let's say, North Sea, because in the international area, everybody compares East Mediterranean with North Sea. And after the Tuna 1 discovery, everyone started to talk, maybe in the Black Sea, we're gonna see another North Sea in the North Sea. Because if you look at the Tuna 1 location, this is just 100 kilometers south of the Neptune gas field, which is offshore of Romania. And actually in this field, OMV, Petrom, as well as ExxonMobil discovered gas before. So therefore, I think the Tuna 1 also proves that there is a working gas system in terms of upstream industry. From this perspective, I think it's also very substantial. But when it comes to the Turkish economy, does it change the entire picture? In the short run, it's not going to change the entire picture. This is clear. But in the mid to long term, it has potential to change the entire picture. But even in the short term, there are many leverages, of course, this field bring to Turkish economy. The first, if Turkey covers 1/3 of the entire gas demand from its own domestic resources, it means a lot in terms of gapping the foreign account deficit. Today, 15 BCM of production cuts around $3 to $3.5 billion of current account deficit in Turkey, which is a substantial amount of money. And the second point, I can't add more to Laurent's remarks about APH and gas market competitiveness. He is perfectly right. And actually, these are the points what we have been continuously telling to the Turkish governments. But if we see more competition in the market, of course, the Sakarya field also will add positive to the Turkish competition in the market. And third, of course, why this gas field cannot be another supply sources for the Eastern European countries over Turkish system. This is also very possible. I think from this perspective, we are just at the beginning of a very interesting situation in the Black Sea.
Thank you, Eser. Pınar Hocam, how do you see, I mean, do you think the Black Sea gas discovery will change the Turkish relation in Black Sea region, particularly with Russia? And you can also obviously comment on the prospect on the EU-Turkey cooperation in the energy that you couldn't do it on the first round.
Right. Yeah, so from the market perspective and for increasing Turkey's domestic shares, Mr. Özdil, Eser already explained it quite in detail. So from the Russian perspective, again, as Laurent emphasized, that will be a good leverage for BOTAŞ before sitting on the table to renegotiate the Gazprom contracts, which there is one expiring, as Eser Bey showed, first with Azerbaijan, but mostly with from Gazprom Blue Stream up in the 4 years, 2025, and also the West Pipeline, which indeed there are private sectors using that gas as well. So clearly a leverage that is good. That doesn't mean that Turkey would stop getting importing gas from Russia, but it will be an advantage of Turkey for creating this, as both panelists have underlined, competitive and flexible pricing. So if Turkey achieves that, then it will contribute to Turkey's goal for EPH to turn it, although it is in infancy phase, to turn it into a more regional liquid market. And in my opinion, one last point I would like to also share with everybody here is it will be a good example also for the tensions that is right now going on in the East Mediterranean. Why? Because number one, once coastal states have agreed on their EEZs, which is a big debate right now, but it would show that actually it creates a friendly environment for investment. And depending on the further drilling in these offshore fields, we should also remember the Romanian offshore fields. And there is some American companies, there is even the French Total there, ExxonMobil is there in the blocks. So there might be joint development of those fields. And in those fields, who knows, might go into Romania to these north to south and east to west or west to east, given that interconnectors completed, which are under the list of EU's project of common interest. So Turkey can feed into, together these offshore fields via Romanian and Bulgarian transmission system to even up to Poland, if the interconnectors finish, which are under project or are already under construction. So that will show a good cooperation both with large Western MNCs and how it can feed into European energy security, given also the concern not just on diversifying East Europe's high dependence on Russian gas, but also they are also, like Turkey, suffering to minimize their carbon dioxide emissions. They are already producing electricity a lot from solid fuels. So natural gas can be a good alternative because East Europe may not generate that much renewables from solar, given the climate conditions in the East Europe, not like Mediterranean climate, not like in Spain or Portugal. So I think that would be a great example to show how actually the joint development for the region's sake of energy security diversification in the Black Sea region. That's all I would like to emphasize.
Thank you, Pınar Hocam. Well, we received some questions. Mustafa Berke is asking to you, Pınar Hocam. He's saying Turkey's imported coal fleet is relatively young compared to its lignite or domestic coal fleet. As we speak, a 1.3 GW imported coal-fired power plant is being constructed in Hunutlu. How could it be possible to substitute this capacity with RES or natural gas?
Well, as I said, I'm not a technical person, but
you can also, I mean, after Naroja.
Yeah, as far as my understanding, none of these coal-fired plants in Turkey uses carbon capture technology. But Turkey, although signed the Paris Agreement, didn't ratify it. So in the long term, I think we have to also consider this. Given also the Green Deal of EU, the more carbon dioxide emission we have, no matter how we use coal-fired, natural gas-fired, and so on, our major export market is European Union. So indeed, under our manufacturing sectors, 63 subsectors are energy-intensive sectors. So if the European Green Deal would require the carbon print, what they say, to decline, and if there would be carbon tariffs on non-EU countries export to EU, then this would significantly decrease Turkish products' competitiveness. So there was just indeed a presentation last week by Istanbul development think tank in Istanbul, showing the importance of Green Deal to Turkish chambers of commerce firms. If there would be a $30 carbon tariff on 1 ton of carbon emission, a Turkish firm that is producing some manufactured product, energy intensive product, would end in a 30% decline in its profit. So this is definitely a concern. So energy policymakers should also think about, because already in Turkey's Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources strategic plan, there is an emphasis on domestic lignite, which is more actually polluting than other imported coal. So either carbon capture technology or replacing it, like the question asked for renewables. And that would bring in also another challenge. We have to change our electricity transmission system, which is also emphasized in Turkish strategy plan, to move from this hierarchical transmission system to more smart grid-based system. It requires digitalization and so on. So there is a lot to do on that sense, because otherwise you don't want to increase your renewables, leave overall your transmission system that is not connected to your national grid. In China has experienced that bad experience actually. They build up a lot of renewables, but it just sits idle. It doesn't go all the way to the transmission system, because you have to bring in also these smart grid systems and so on. So that's all I would like to say at this point. Thank you.
Eser, would you like to also comment on that? Thank you, Pınar.
Kadri, very briefly, because this is a very specific question about a specific project. The thing that the Turkey's natural gas CCGT fleet is one of the youngest ones in Europe. Just 5 years ago, the CCGTs, the big CCGTs in Turkey, they were consuming more than 20 BCM, 22, 23 BCM, and last year it was barely above of 10 BCM. So actually, the Turkey's natural gas CCGT fleet can easily substitute such a huge power plant of such a huge coal power plant, or some upcoming power plants as well. But the problem is that the Turkey's renewable connections are increasing to the grid, especially the solar and the wind. But this is also increasing the fragility of the system, because when after especially 4, 5, 6 p.m., when the sun is losing its efficiency in the electricity generation, then you need very huge power to substitute these renewable energy sources, because you need to keep the balance of the electricity transmission system in generation and in consumption. Therefore, actually, for the last 10, 15 days, we have seen very high prices, very high hourly prices in Turkish energy exchange. If you look at the daily price, was around, let's say, 40 euros per megawatt hour. But when it comes to 5, 6, 7 p.m., the prices were going to 80, 85 euros, almost double of the market price. The reason is that renewable energy resources are just exiting from the system. So therefore, actually, this is relevant for the entire countries, by the way, in the world. When you inject renewables into the system, you need to also consider the balance of the transmission line. Otherwise, you create huge costs to the end users, as well as you need to force your system to construct more thermal power plants. For example, Germany making it via coal power plants. For example, everybody talks about the German renewable energy revolution, but no one is talking about the increasing coal generation as well. Or, for example, Germany is also ensuring this balance via nuclears from France. Therefore, we should keep in mind this balance. But to keep short my answer, I think if there is no regional shortage in the Adana region, I don't know, the Turkish CCGTs are easily substitute such a project.
Laurent, please don't hesitate to come in if you want to say something.
Well, just very briefly, yeah, everything that Eser and Pınar said was right, but you can overcome these obstacles. I mean, if you look at a country like, there's a way you hold a tender for a big utility scale wind or solar PV. Turkey's done a bit of this, of course, through, I guess, the GMF-TOBB project. Bids are coming in incredibly cheap now. You're getting two euros per megawatt hour, things like that, because the price costs of those things have come down and down and down. And then that's cheap power, but it's intermittent. Then you have to deal with all these other issues related to transmission. So there are challenges. You can do it. You have to figure out a way to compensate. Some of these thermal plants will be running less. These are all issues where the EU has started to think through and continues to think through how to deal with them. So, but it can be done, and that's certainly where a lot of other countries see the future. And I expect Turkey will head in that direction, as well, sooner or later.
Thank you.
Kadri, you are asking the questions, but may I intervene?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Because there is a very interesting question that I didn't want to be missed in this line. There is an anonymous question.
Yeah, I would ask it.
In Turkey's interest? Yeah, this is a very interesting question, actually, because I think this anonymous attendee is one of the bureaucrats. I assume that. I think that because these are most of the questions are coming from the EU quarters.
Thank you to decipher it.
This is my experience in discussing with DG Energy, especially when they ask.
Let's go with this question in this case, because it was actually I would go later, but exactly it's coming from anonymous attendee. If he's a bureaucrat, you are saying, would it be in Turkey's interest to join the energy community? What are the benefits and disadvantages and costs for both gas and power? You can all answer. Go ahead.
Well, maybe I can briefly answer. The energy community, established to harmonize, especially the energy legislation of the Balkan countries with EU legislation. For EU candidate countries, we have another harmonization tool, which is opening chapters to negotiations. This is the major point of the government of Turkey doesn't want to be a member of the Energy Community Secretariat. This option was offered many times from the EU decision makers to Turkey. Be an Energy Community member and harmonize your energy legislation with EU legislation. But the position of Turkey, we are ready to harmonize our energy legislation with EU legislation. We are ready to open energy chapter for negotiations for the last, I think, 15 years. But I don't know whether it is still the same. This chapter is blocked by the votes of Republic of Cyprus as well as Greece, if I'm not mistaken. Therefore, actually, the government of Turkey or the Turkish decision makers, I don't say negative, but not sympathetic to be a member of the Energy Community Secretariat. This is my information. I think it's better to open up this chapter for negotiations.
Well, I mentioned the energy community earlier. My apolitical view, I didn't know it was wrapped up in this issue over Turkish EU accession. So, from an apolitical point of view, obviously that's the way to integrate with Europe. If there are political obstacles to that, obviously you're letting someone else set your rules, which, a lot of countries have accepted that, but, I can imagine a country not wanting to do that. But trying to harmonize with your own set of rules that are going to be a little bit different here, a little bit different there, makes it much more complicated. But if politically it doesn't work, then it doesn't work.
Can I jump in as well? I'm very glad that Mr. Özdil raised this issue. I didn't see the question, but I was actually going to comment on Mr. Ruseckas' point about energy community, and largely Eser already answered that. And definitely it was especially not Greece, but the Republic of Cyprus, Southern Cyprus, Greek administration veto on opening that chapter once we had much better relations ongoing accession talks. But right now, as we all know, there is a stalemate. However, despite this, Turkey's not preference position, not preferring to be an energy community member, obviously because Turkey wants to be an EU member. That was the major reason. In the process, as we said, politically that was blocked. However, cooperation and willingness of Turkey, especially in energy, continued. How indeed there was an agreement between Turkey's transmission operator in electricity, TEAŞ, and energy European national transmission system operators for electricity and COEs. There was an agreement for harmonizing the codes and the system for the electricity market. So there is no problem for the electricity market, but gas, even at that time, Turkey, even if they did, as we just in detail presented, because of the long-term contracts, and at that time there was no EPİAŞ, the regional gas hub, so it wouldn't be wise to step into that one. But now there is more room to go, so perhaps a positive item on the positive agenda between Turkey and EU might open this energy charter, and hope that our neighbors in Cyprus and Greece wouldn't veto the chapters.
They can't veto Turkey joining the energy community. So.
Well, it would be difficult with the chapter, actually, if you relate the Turkish energy cooperation with the EU through the accession process. We should wait a lot, maybe.
That's true.
So why we are looking for other way to continue to have to construct this cooperation? Well, someone
Kadri, I'm sorry, I am interrupting you the second time.
Don't worry.
This is a very small intervention.
Go ahead.
As you said, probably we will have to wait a little bit more to open this chapter for negotiation. But even if these chapters are not open for negotiation, there is a natural proximity. EU legislation is natural proximity for Turkish legislation. When you design, for example, when we were designing EPİAŞ along with EMRA, we looked at EU legislation. When we were designing the contract structure at EPİAŞ, intraday future contracts, we are looking at the EU legislation. When we are designing interconnection agreements between Bulgar Ruseckas and BOTAŞ, we are looking to EU legislation. So in the practice, even if the legislation, even if the chapter is not open for negotiations, from practicality, we are looking to EU legislation because we're gonna somehow cooperate with EU countries. This is inevitable.
No,
so even I can say in the current legislation, we are not that bad in harmonization perspective. But of course, this is not ideal. We are not part of EU legislation, and I cannot say that fully harmonized, but even the current structure is not that bad, actually.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Actually, there's a question. Zeynep Elbaşı is asking, how exactly do you think flexible, competitive supply could impact EPİAŞ?
I think we discussed this situation many times with Zeyno Hanım before at platform meetings because she is working for BP and we know each other very well, especially for platform meetings. I don't know how many times we discussed at gas group meetings or platform. Well, this affects very positively and very largely, I can say, the EPİAŞ. If import is if we have more flexible competitive imports, not only from BOTAŞ or limited suppliers, for more suppliers, actually I can say more than 300 companies are licensed by EMRA to act in Turkish natural gas market right now, and almost over 50 companies having spot import or LNG import licenses. So most probably we will have more colorful market and we will have more liquidity at EPİAŞ. And if we have more liquidity, of course, we can then talk about more concretely about the price proximity and price correlation between EU hubs and EPİAŞ. Of course, this facilitates Turkish market and other regional EU markets very positively.
Pınar Hanım or Laurent, if you'd like to say something. That will comment. Okay, great. To Eser Bey, İlham Abra Akbarov, sorry, it's just a comment. Turkey is observer of ECS. Okay.
Yeah, it's different than being a member. Yeah, he's right.
Well, Ramil Taghili is asking how the recent event in Azerbaijan, probably Nagorno-Karabakh, probably he wants to say, affect EU-Turkey energy relations. Who would like to comment on that?
I can go ahead. Yeah. Well, I think more than EU, what is more highlighted right now about the conflict is the Minsk group. And in the Minsk group, we have the France, Russia, and US. So France France being an EU member, and France, the tension between Turkey and France because of, again, these Mediterranean issues and Libya, unfortunately, do not bring a large contribution, positive contribution into the relations, because there is already a distrust between EU and Turkey regarding mostly about the continental shelf issue, the limitation of maritime zones in the East Mediterranean. So in light of those already tense agenda, unfortunately, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict have just started. So, but I think clearly the attacks closer, especially last July in the Taurus region, closed the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline and oil and gas infrastructure, export infrastructure of Azerbaijan via Georgia to Turkey, have highlighted and maybe gave a message that these trans-border infrastructures are vulnerable. So it highlighted some geopolitical uncertainty. That's why, again, it's a good and a negative example that there must be, for each EU member and including Turkey, and using Turkey's this increasing LNG capacity and so on, if any problem in those infrastructure, Turkey can serve as a regional hub and transfer alternative gas capacity to Southeast Europe or Eastern Europe. So that highlighted the need, in my opinion, to further diversify and to facilitate a regional gas hub via EPH.
Thank you. Well, it's kind of like a comment. Herbert Reginbogen is saying, when will Turkey, being one of the largest air pollutant related to the fossil fuel industry due to not sufficient investment in capture collection technology? Do you know an answer?
No, I don't know.
Okay, great.
I don't know personally.
Well, another question, anonymous attendee, so it should be from a Eurocrat again, I suppose. How will the conflict of interest in the Eastern Mediterranean play out in the short term, approximately 5 years? How would a change in the US, this was the first question, sorry. And the second, how would a change in the US presidency alter EU-Turkey energy relations? Is a transatlantic question.
I will sort of not answer the question, but just make one point. I have no idea how the situation will be resolved in the 5-year perspective. What I would just say as an American, I know that Joe Biden made some comments in an interview in January that have been taken very negatively in Turkey, with good reason if you read the comments. And I also know that, you know, there's a feeling just from his background, and he sort of supported, or was reputed during the Obama administration to support, you know, a Kurdish state as one to divide up Iraq, a policy that was not adopted by the US. So I would just say only that I wouldn't put too much emphasis on some historical statements or past policies of Biden. I think if he's elected and his administration takes office, you know, you'll go from having the US foreign policy set in kind of a weird, random, unpredictable way and not really having any credibility or being dependable, to one that's more of a normal US foreign policy. And I don't think that's going to be a policy. I mean, obviously there's differences of opinion on a range of issues between the US and Turkey, but I don't think it's going to be a sort of an anti-Turkish, policy in any. I would emphasize the positive elements of having a normal, American foreign policy much more than, any perceived anti-Turkish bias from Joe Biden.
Someone else would like to comment? Otherwise, I will ask another question.
Just very quickly, I agree with Laurent. Unfortunately, for the last 2-3 years, despite the close relations at the presidential level between President Erdogan and President Trump, US-Turkish relations are tense, are not in the best ever in its history. So a positive comment perhaps to show the future some improvement in relations. The more Turkey actually, historically, this is historically also true, the more Turkey and US stays bilaterally in regional issues, the more it has conflicts, no matter what the presidents, whoever the presidents are. So the more the regional issues are taken on institutionalized platforms like NATO, the more manageable the tension and issues. So perhaps all those issues could be, I'm not just necessarily saying NATO, but other regional platforms that Turkey are not isolated and Turkey is part of it, would be a starting point for regional cooperation.
Thank you. There's a question from Alexander Loengaro. To which extent, in your opinion, can tension over exploration in the Aegean and around Cyprus be addressed by the EU, European countries, by taking into account Turkey's overall energy concern?
I would say, I said something along these lines before, I would say not at all. I mean, I don't think that's about energy, really. I think it's about Turkey's grievances in a few areas and trying to address those, and Turkey, the fact that Turkey discovered a big gas field, which has nothing to do with Western policy anyway, is not going to sort of change that.
No, Hocam, you didn't get the question.
Yes, I was looking at. Yeah,
asking if the EU is taking into consideration Turkey's energy concern when it comes to this East-Med tension.
Didn't we talk about it? So what is this question is different about? I still couldn't understand.
Well, the question is the EU or the EU countries are taking into consideration also Turkey's energy concerns when it comes to the tension. Not only, the territorial discussion.
Yes, actually, Laurent said this. This is more about the territorial issues, geopolitics. That's true, but I think overall, also energy diversification of Turkey and increasing domestic resources for the simple and strict purpose of cutting down Turkey's trade deficit is also a driving force. So Black Sea, we were lucky. We, despite few drills, we could hit it, but there wasn't enough drilling right now in Mediterranean for the obvious reasons of tensions. But around the Cyprus, because of Turkey's agreement between the Turkish Republic of Cyprus and Turkey, drilling can continue because we have a continental shelf and delimitation agreement. And there is the disputed area because of the Turkey, Libya, and Greece, Egypt deals. Drilling haven't started there yet. There is only seismic surveys under the Turkey's portion of continental shelf. So those, I would say, these concerns are, again, as I said, yes, continental shelf geopolitics are important in addition to Asian issues, but another major driving force is actually Turkey would like to cut down its energy import bill. Once, if the exploratory talks can continue with Greece, there might be a joint development in the future. And there was the question of this 5 years thing right now, because there is a glut of natural gas supply in the market. And the prices are not that competitive for offshore drilling right now. And given the pandemic also, the demand is also suppressed and the prices are not, the cost is relatively higher. So you have to compete with the Russian pipeline, cheaper gas and so on. But if you consider the growing demand in Asia, or like I said, in this region, by time, there might be opportunity, and the private firms would decide this. They would produce this, they would develop this. But in order to bring in these big players into the region, which there is already Chevron, for example, who bought the Israeli company. But in order to proceed further, again, joint development can be, and in these exploratory talks, perhaps a compartmentalization of issues can succeed, because Mediterranean is different than the agency issues. So if you just focus diplomatically on the Mediterranean, there is still, I think, a chance to move further. But we have to see the results of the elections. There would be elections in Turkey in 2023. So change in leadership might be helpful as well.
Laurent, would you like to say something?
I just think it's still not about gas. I mean, Turkey has just discovered a giant field in undisputed Turkish waters. As Eser said, there's going to be more. You don't just find a giant gas field and there's nothing else around it. We already know it's a prolific basin because of Neptune. You know, if you want to find gas to reduce energy import dependency, that's where you go. You don't go in a sort of low prospectivity basin north of Cyprus in the East Med in disputed waters. So,
okay, Eser, I will also give you the floor, but just let me, because we have just 4 minutes, we have a couple of other questions. I want to just read them, and then you will have each some minutes to answer them. One is coming from a journalist, Brussels-based journalist, Anna Van Densky. This week, good news from Geneva came. According to the UN envoy, situation in Libya is normalizing. Very optimistic. But it's also reflected in Libyans started to export 3 times more oil. What impact Libyan oil export will have on EU-Turkey relations? She's asking. Another question from Ilham Akbarov. In general, what are prospects for hydrogen and its blending in existing natural gas pipeline in Turkey? And another question from anonymous attendee: how much a role does China play in the Turkish energy market? Lately, we have seen coal plants being financed by China. Is China a structural bomber to energy transition in Turkey? Eser, I would like to start with you, and then Pınar and Laurent, if you want to have concluding remarks, and then we will wrap up. Go ahead.
So, Kadri, I think also I can take these questions one by one. So let's start with the China question. Well, China is becoming more active player in Turkish energy market in the last years, especially. Not only financing the coal power plants, also providing some EPC contractor works on the natural gas underground storages as well. But saying China is a bomber to energy transition in Turkey, it would be a little bit unfair, I think. The second one about the hydrogen. Well, this is critical issue. Well, I know that the Turkish scientific institution, which is called TÜBİTAK, like 20 years ago, they have conducted some studies about blending hydrogen to Turkish natural gas distribution system as well as high pressure system. But in accordance with the developments in EU, the natural gas distribution companies, which are liberalized years ago, they are also conducting extensive studies to blend hydrogen, but this is not an easy task, I must say. So, but there are studies here, but I don't have any concrete date, or I don't have any concrete percentage of the hydrogen to be injected to Turkish natural gas distribution system. The Libya oil exports, well, this is good news actually, because most of the Turkish constructors still, and they need to get some payments from the Libyan institutions if they can find any. So I don't know if these exports have some direct political impact EU-Turkey relations, but actually normalization in Libya is a good news in overall, I must say. The last question about, well, the question was about the Cyprus issue, the Kadri. Actually, I think you need to unmute yourself, Kadri.
I'm really sorry, but I have just actually.
Okay, I stopped then.
My colleagues just had told me that we have to stop in 1 minute. It's
Okay,
already,
now I stopped then.
I think we are already in time.
Okay, I
I'm
stopped.
sorry for those who asked the question too. I'm really sorry that we couldn't, because probably GMF has another meeting that will start soon. But I would like to thank all of you. It was really terrific. And thank you for joining us and making this happen. Really, thank you so much, Pınar Hanım, Eser, Laurent. It was great. And let me to thank my colleague Anika and Jessica for their help to pull off this together. And above all, of course, thanks all of you joining us, to our audience. And thank you, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like
Bye-bye.
to thank all participants as well as German Marshall Fund for organizing this very timely event. And actually, Kadri, you managed very well. You deserve a very big thank, actually.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you.
Bye. Take care. Bye.